The buddy cop movie is a proven Hollywood formula that can work if all the pieces are just right. They usually involve a mismatched pair with one who's all about following the rules, while the other is more into breaking them. You usually need the perfect straight man and someone wacky enough to make them roll their eyes while also reminding them that maybe they need to live a little. Some of the best buddy cop movies tap into different aspects of this formula. Who doesn't enjoy Mel Gibson's Martin Riggs and Danny Glover's Roger Murtaugh, working out their differences to great success in Lethal Weapon? The laughs also flow when Nick Nolte's Cop and Eddie Murphy's Convict are forced to work together in Walter Hill's 48 Hours. It's usually about finding that proper chemistry. Sometimes it's so out of the box that it shouldn't work, but does. Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan in Rush Hour, a duo we didn't know we needed. Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill in 21 Jump Street, a gift that keeps on giving after each rewatch. Given the success of some of these mismatched pairings, it's not too surprising that Columbia Pictures thought it would be a great idea to pair Josh Hartnett, an actor who was very of the moment at the time, thanks to roles in The Faculty, Black Hawk Down, Pearl Harbor, and 40 Days and 40 Nights, with Hollywood legend Harrison Ford, the man who brought some of our favorite movie characters to life. He even played the President of the United States. What can't Harrison Ford handle? Apparently, working with Josh Hartnett, because when it came to filming the 2003 buddy cop action comedy Hollywood Homicide, the two actors reportedly didn't get along too well. Ford stepped into his grumpy old man persona by allegedly calling Josh Hartnett a punk, while Hartnett, the young it guy of the early 2000s, called him an old fart. I guess the mismatched buddy comedy chemistry can only work when you actually get along in real life. And what we're seeing on screen is actually just acting, because Hollywood Homicide failed with critics and moviegoers at the time of its release. Despite an interesting true life inspired backstory, the pairing of Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett just wasn't what it needed to be. And now, we're tasked with figuring out just what went wrong with these two partners, as we crack the case and figure out what the f*** happened to this movie. Hollywood Homicide was directed by Ron Shelton from a script co-written by Shelton and Robert Souza. The basis for the film is actually pretty interesting, as it's based on Souza's true experiences as a homicide detective in the LAPD Hollywood division, while he was also working as a real estate broker during the last decade of the job. In fact, a scene where a cuffed criminal steals the gun from an officer's belt and starts shooting it off in the parking lot actually happened to Souza. The movie finds the two main characters moonlighting in other professions, with Harrison Ford's Sergeant Joe Gavilan being based on Souza, while Josh Hartnett's Detective K.C. Calden is his much younger current partner who's also working as a yoga teacher with dreams of being an actor. The two are thrown together to investigate the murders of 4 members of the hip-hop group H2O Click after they're gunned down in a nightclub. The two are constantly distracted by the fact that they simply don't click as partners, and the former is feeling stressed because he's in the midst of a looming real estate deal that could get him out of debt, while the latter wants to be noticed by talent agents so he can make it in Hollywood. There will be disagreements along the way, but eventually the veteran and the youngin' form a solid partnership that apparently never really translated off screen. More on that later. Before Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett landed the lead roles, they were originally planned for John Travolta and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I suspect they would have gotten along a little bit better than Ford and Hartnett in real life, but this shall remain one of those Hollywood mysteries that may never be solved. The movie was also conceived as a drama, but Marion Suge Knight, the big scary dude that used to run Death Row Records, complained to producers because the movie seems to be taking a bit too much inspiration from the real-life murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, crimes that Suge Knight was allegedly tied to, if you believe what the streets have said for years. The film couldn't be a hard-hitting drama about hip-hop murders that would probably ring too true to the life of Suge Knight, so they lightened things up and made the movie a comedy. I mean, have you seen Suge Knight? At the time, you can see why changes were made purely out of fear and value of life. Director Ron Shelton and co-writer Robert Souza came together on this project after working together on the 2002 film Dark Blue. Souza served as an advisor on the film since he was a former cop, and Shelton was so impressed by Souza's knowledge that he asked him to work with him on Hollywood Homicide. Souza's experience would shape a lot of the finished product. For instance, a subplot involving Gavilan trying to sell Jerry Duran's house, played by the late Martin Landau, to Julius Armas, played by Master P, was actually based on Souza's real-life attempt to sell Robert Evans' house to Dodi Fayed. Souza did bodyguard work for Fayed, and he was in the music business at the time. Something tells us there's a more interesting movie buried in this script that we just didn't get to see. Hollywood Homicide has some other interesting real-life connections that prove to be more fascinating than the finished product. Director Ron Shelton said that, based on the script, when Josh Hartnett's Casey called and leaves a screenplay at Jerry Duran's house, it was actually taken loosely from a real event. A police officer who happened to be an aspiring screenwriter was sent to a house to investigate a crime. When the officer learned that the house was owned by a film producer, he ran out to his car and brought in a screenplay he had been working on and actually gave it to the producer. Only in Hollywood. The film also strived to have a fairly realistic portrayal of the hip-hop industry, even though some of this was muted when the film became a comedy rather than a drama. Some critics also pointed to some interesting parallels between the legends of the Motown era and the emergence and dominance of hip-hop that spoke to the fundamental differences of the main characters. Music artists from both eras are present, with the likes of Gladys Knight, Smokey Robinson, Corrupt, Master P, and Andre 3000 all making appearances. It's a parallel that isn't given the time that's necessary to really stand out in a significant way, but you can tell the filmmakers attempted to show the differences between the music artists and Ford and Hartnett's characters. Hartnett's ringtone is the more upbeat and fun Funky Town, while Ford's ringtone is the more classic My Girl.
Guy cop. Cop guy.
Okay.
Given the film's namesake, Hollywood Homicide was filmed in some of the most known places in the industry in and around LA, including Rodeo Drive, Santa Monica, the Venice Canals, Long Beach, Beverly Hills, and, of course, Hollywood. It was a crowded team in Los Angeles for action-packed movies because, at one point, SWAT, The Italian Job, and this movie were all filming on the streets of downtown LA at the same time. Anyone else think Josh Hartnett wishes he would have jumped ship to one of those movies? Given the issues that took place between the young actor and his more seasoned co-star, we're betting probably. According to various reports, Ford and Hartnett really didn't get along. In fact, it got so bad that the two allegedly wouldn't even look each other in the eye when they shared some scenes together. When speaking to Contact Music in 2003 about working with Ford, Hartnett said, quote, "There were times we would end up just sitting in the car when we were supposed to be doing a scene and neither of us would say anything for like an hour." Hartnett also said in another interview for The Mirror in 2003 that, quote, "Over the course of the film, we had our ups and downs. Harrison has a dry sense of humor and he's very sarcastic. He's an intimidating guy. He tested me to the limit, so I hated him for a while." Another telling quote, and something that a 25-year-old Hartnett would say then and probably not now, the actor added, quote, "He gave me shit about the choices I made. That's not a cop haircut." Things like that. Other than Brad Pitt in The Devil's Own, I think I'm really only the second young guy he's worked with in his career. He did say he believes that their dynamic improved by the end of filming and added, quote, "I think there was a testing period I had to endure, but we ended up getting along near the end." Harrison Ford added in the same interview at the time that, quote, "These two characters are not buddies. They are guys who work together but don't understand each other at all. I thought that was pretty much reflected in our relationship, and I didn't try to disturb that." Some say that this tense nature between the actors carried on through the promotional tour of the film, but when they presented at the 2003 MTV Movie Awards, they joked around on stage and seemed friendly enough. Hartnett also said in 2003 during his Mirror interview that, quote, "Harrison doesn't suffer fools. He wants to make sure that you're not one. Therefore, he pushes your buttons for a long time. Then eventually you just have to say, 'Harrison, I'm going to kill you.' By the end of it, we ended up getting along really well. Yeah, sounds like a fantastic work environment." The two actors really haven't spoken out about more detailed issues. And since the film is almost 20 years old, we doubt either side will provide any new insight into the production. Harrison Ford does have a bit of a reputation for being a tad grumpy, particularly during interviews and press junkets for some of his films. It's kind of a crazy notion since he has played two of the coolest characters in movie history with Han Solo and Indiana Jones. How can the guy who brought them to life be that grumpy? To be fair, it's Harrison Ford's job to lay it out on the screen and not to necessarily be a constant joy during interviews. So we guess we just had to take what we can get from him. Hollywood Homicide was given a cushy June 13th summer release date. As you can tell, Columbia Pictures believed the movie would catch on with the summer movie crowd. This was not to be the case, and the film ranked 5th with an opening weekend of just $11.1 million. The film was dealt heavy competition by the movie's release at the time because it came in behind the third weekend of Finding Nemo, the second weekend of Too Fast, Too Furious, and the fourth weekend of Bruce Almighty, and the opening of Rugrats Go Wild. Yep, Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett were defeated by the third installment of the Rugrats franchise. Word of mouth was not solid for the film, and it tumbled 46.6% to 8th place with a gross of $5.9 million. By the end of its run, Hollywood Homicide grossed a mere $30.9 million domestically and $51.1 million worldwide. Given its reported $75 million budget, it was a box office failure. Reviews didn't help either. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film registered a rotten score of 30%, and its consensus reads, quote, "Hollywood Homicide suffers from too many subplots and not enough laughs." In a telling comment about the relationship between Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett, Michael O'Sullivan of the Washington Post wrote, "Hollywood Homicide is a buddy film starring two people who, even as the closing credits roll, appear to have just met." He also added that every scene between them, and that's most every scene, feels like a screen test, or at best, a rehearsal. Kevin Carr of Fat Guy at the Movies said, "Hollywood Homicide tries to be a lethal weapon for a new generation, without the likable characters, cool action scenes, and James Bond-style bad guys." Another review said, "I guess you can't blame Ford for being bored during most of this, but it's too bad the fact is so painfully apparent throughout the movie." Perhaps the most scathing review came from Harrison Ford himself. He stated during an interview that this was the worst film he ever did in his career, and that he only did it for the money. And just so this doesn't end with complete negativity, Roger Ebert awarded the film 3 out of 4 stars, and said, quote, that it's more interested in its two goofy cops than in the murder plot. Their dialogue redeems otherwise standard scenes. Life, of course, would go on for Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett after Hollywood Homicide. Like any veteran actor, Ford would go on to have some more hits and a few misses, including Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Cowboys and Aliens, 42, Ender's Game, and The Age of Adeline. He also made it a point to jump back into some of his more iconic roles in Star Wars The Force Awakens and Blade Runner 2049. He's even going to give it one more go as Indiana Jones in a 5th film set to be released next year. As for Josh Hartnett, the actor opted to choose more interesting fare that didn't really gain full mainstream success. After Hollywood Homicide, the actor appeared in films like Wicker Park, The Black Dahlia, Lucky Number 11, and 30 Days of Night. While Hartnett steadily worked, his career seemed to stall, as he seemed to reject more high-profile roles in favor of more personal projects. That's not to say he was down for the count. The actor was a regular on the series Penny Dreadful from 2014 to 2016. And he found a bit of a connection with director Guy Ritchie in Wrath of Man and the yet-to-be-released Operation Fortune. He will also be appearing in Christopher Nolan's Father of the Atomic Bomb biopic Oppenheimer, where he'll be surrounded by an all-star cast that includes Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., and Florence Pugh. We could say he's in pretty good company right now. In the case of director Ron Shelton, he didn't direct another film again until 2017's Just Getting Started. So he was either taking a very long break between films, or this movie ended up hurting his chances to helm a major studio release. This would also prove to be the final title sequence done by Wayne Fitzgerald. The film title designer had a career that spanned 55 years, and he designed many main and end title sequences for top-tier directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Mike Nichols, Robert Redford, John Hughes, and Quentin Tarantino, just to name a few. Fitzgerald passed away in September of 2019. Sadly, the company wasn't warm for Hollywood Homicide. What should have been a fun mix of old guard and new kid on the block turned into a squandered opportunity. The real tension, even if it was mostly resolved by the end of production, does seem to spill onto the screen, and the lack of chemistry makes for a buddy cop comedy that simply doesn't work.